Hey guys, welcome back to Piper's Pop-Ups and Vintage Campers. I don't know if I've shown this before, but if you're wondering where the pop-up came from, we've renovated a few Coleman pop-ups. There's our Niagara and our Santa Fe. So that's where the original name came from. Then we got interested in canned ham. So this is our 1957 Aljo. Obviously I framed the wall and I just got the roof rim on. I don't know what to call it, but the rail that goes all along the top and the sides to create the curve. This is the door side, which would be the street curb side with the door in it, and obviously I have not put the strips on it to create the curve. Now my Aljo came with 1.5 inch by 1/4 inch strips creating the curve. I can tell you that created a little bit of issue for me on more kind of tight turns like there and over there. Some of the boards cracked when I put them on initially, so I had to kerf a few of the boards on the last couple of runs. Obviously the last 2 runs were easier than the first 2 because the curve is slightly less, but it was still difficult. And rather than just stapling into the studs, the joists, whatever you want to call them in a camper, like I've seen online, I had to use my staple gun to staple along the way, meaning to create the curve. I couldn't just jump from stud to stud to stud to stud, or it might crack. So I had to staple all along there as I went for each layer to create the curve. If you think about it, it's, you know, you're kind of helping that wood bend. Oh, by the way, I stapled my finger twice. So that was it was challenging. I'm not gonna lie, it was very challenging. Then this morning we pulled out the tins, placed it over the template, over the wall framing, just to see how close I came. And I'll remind you, if you hadn't seen the first few videos, this is the shape the walls were in. When I took the exterior skins off of our Aljo, the walls basically crumbled. None of the last 4 inches on the bottom of the walls was there, so I had to kind of guesstimate for that. Most of the roof railing, like you can see, that's still there. Most of it was rotten, pieces missing, so you kind of had to guess. So my point is, when I went to lay out the frames, although I did lay it on top of the old framing to get an idea of it, it wasn't exact. It was off. This one was pretty close. Now you probably noticed a couple of interesting pieces here. My interior curves at the bottom, these were missing on the camper on both sides. I took an educated guess when I first laid this out. I was off by about 2 inches. So I had the curve kind of coming down when in fact it swooped under. So I had to add some treated wood blocking here, cut the curve, nailed into, and of course everything's glued and laminated. So I'm comfortable with this, with that being secure, especially once it's wrapped. Although I'm debating about taking a piece of metal, just a little 1-inch strapping rather, and nailing that, but I haven't gotten there yet. Same thing up front. I was off by about 2 inches. I had it coming down more straight, and then once we got all the tins lined up, we realized that corner had to come off. So same thing here. I just ended that curve here, added the blocking, and of course it's screwed, blah, blah, blah. That's not going anywhere. Again, I'm not concerned about any of this as far as the function goes. It just would have been great if I had those bottoms so I could have gotten the curve right. Our windows were pretty close. I had to shave like 1/4 inch off of that frame. I'm not upset about that at all. But when you come to the door side, it was a different story altogether. This wall was in 3 pieces. The bottom was missing. It was just a crapshoot. So I put this together using my best, which was none, by the way, because it's my first my first vintage canned ham. Just kind of using common sense, right? Basing it on that, laying it out. Well, what we found was this morning when we laid the tin over this, I was off by about 2 inches on the top, so that has to be trimmed. About 1 inch here. This is good. Same thing up here, you know, above the door. But where it really missed the mark is obviously once I have to move this down 2 inches, the windows, any of the openings that you could imagine, or even bracing for where we're going to screw the seams in that were horizontal, have to be shifted. So for example, this board will no longer line up with the seam of the 10, so I've got to add a board above it. Not a big deal, just a little tedious. See if there's any other examples of that. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to add a board there because this one's off. I'll add a board here. So you can imagine, so all of this, these horizontal boards have to be adjusted. Again, not the end of the world. I am gonna have to move the window framing. These two pieces have to be shifted over about 1/2 inch. I could easily cut that and add here, but since, I don't know if I talked about this the other day, when I built this, I built it with construction screws and or nails. And I did it either butt end or a pocket screw. I know a lot of guys online are doing pocket screws. You can see I did that here and here, but I also added a butt screw. I love a pocket screw, don't get me wrong, but if I can go into the end with a good 2-inch long screw, I'm gonna do that. I also added glue to each of the joints to add to the strength. So that could present a challenge. I'm gonna try a couple, and if they're just there, I'm just gonna add a piece, trim a piece. You know, I'm not gonna kill myself. For example, up here, I'm not moving these at all. I'm just adding. They'll just be extra wall studs, if you will. So the bottom was closer than I'd imagined. I've got to trim about 1.5 inches off of the bottom of these to run my bottom rail. This is just temporary to keep the door open. These curves were pretty good, except see what's going wrong with that piece? Yeah, that's what happens when you've been working on something for 6 hours and it's about 8 o'clock at night, and you really should go on in, and I didn't. So that piece has to be rotated so that it matches the curve. Again, not a big deal. Screwed at the end there. I'll loosen it, turn it. Hopefully everything will be fine. And then by the end of today, I expect to have this wall looking like that wall so I can put my plywood on tomorrow. But even though this is all extremely frustrating, I'll be honest, it's not that bad. Again, if you're just remotely handy with a table saw and some hand tools, it's wood. It's very forgiving, right? If you cut it too short, you add a piece. If you cut it too long, you trim it. That's the thing I like about this. Unlike the pop-ups, that's all metal, and it's very exacting. It's engineered to within like 1/4 inch on the cables and stuff, so it's much more frustrating to work on those than these. Now, ask me that at the end of today, and I might change my mind. All right, Rooster, you ready to get to it? Rooster's ready. Tilly, I know she's ready. Tilly's ready. All right, we're gonna get back at it.